In this week's episode, which is one of my personal favourites so far, you'll discover these 3 things. Number 1, how to find your North Star and why every business should have one. Number 2, the 3 tick boxes you must have checked before launching on your own. And number 3, the 2 types of leader that every business needs. So stay tuned for all of that and much, much, much more on this week's episode of The Truth About Business. I'm Benjamin Brain, and by day I'm a director of a multi-award-winning family-run business. And by night, I interview successful business owners to share their journeys, experiences and truths to serve as inspiration, motivation and first-hand education for like-minded entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs to fast-track our own business success. This is the truth about business, told by those who have been there, done that and have the scars to prove it. From the good times to the bad, the marketing strategies and sales tactics to the productivity hacks and success habits. I'm here to give you the de-sugar-coated version of what it's really like and what really works. If you're thinking of starting a business or are already in business, I created this for you. So let's get started. But before we do, if you haven't left a rating for the show on iTunes, please do. It makes a massive difference and helps me to continue to create this podcast and spread our mission to more people. And wherever you're listening right now, providing that it's safe to do so, take a shot and tag me in on Instagram at Truth About Business, and I'll pick one up to shout out in the next episode. Shout out to Sean Clare of Blue Arrow Recruitment for your screenshot and messages of support. It makes a big difference, so thank you. In this jam-packed episode, I talk business with Susan Hallam MBE. Susan is the founder and CEO at Hallam, which is a digital marketing agency based in Nottingham City Centre. Having started the business almost 20 years ago, Susan and the team at Hallam are a major force to be reckoned with in the digital marketing world, winning many prestigious awards over the years, including just recently being named as Google's top digital agency in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Now, as well as being a top influencer and leader in the internet world and a frequent keynote speaker, Susan is a Freeman of the City of London and was also awarded an MBE in the 2018 Queen's New Year's Honours for her services to entrepreneurship and innovation. So to find out more about Susan and the team at Hallam, visit hallaminternet.com, or you can find Susan on LinkedIn, Hallam spelt Hallam. Now, when Susan first agreed to feature as a guest on the show, I knew I was in for an amazing interview, and she did not disappoint. We managed to condense 20 years of business wisdom and experience into this episode, and after hearing Susan speak so passionately about business, it's no wonder that Hallam are not only incredibly successful, but have also stood the test of time with almost 20 years under their belts and still going stronger than ever. You know, success leaves footprints. So let's take a walk with a truly inspirational entrepreneur and internationally recognized digital marketing expert, Susan Hallam MBE. Susan, welcome to The Truth About Business.
It's good to be here.
So, having looked through some of your background and the awards and the achievements that you've had, which are many, I think the first question for me today has got to be, what is a Freeman of the City of London and how do you become one?
Good question. I guess I don't sound like the most typical Freeman of the City of London, do I? The idea of Freeman of the City of London for me personally came actually from one of the livery companies. And if you think of the medieval livery companies, it had to do with things like fan makers and grocers. There is a livery company of information technologists, which is indeed the 100th livery company in the City of London. And I was proposed as a member of the livery company. And by that, you then agree to do charitable work. You're interested in the work that you do in my work in terms of information technology. And then getting through the hurdles of becoming a freeman of my livery company, I then was offered the opportunity to become a freeman of the City of London. So you'll have to come and join me when I drive my sheep over London Bridge.
Tell us a bit more about that. What are the actual benefits apart from being able to drive your many sheep over there?
Well, there are a few that would make you laugh. So, for example, if I were convicted of murder, they would hang me by a silken rope.
Okay, nice way to go.
But more importantly, actually, what it does is put you in a circle of really interesting business professionals who are involved in the industry, in my case, information technology, but you get to meet other people who are really successful, really interesting business people who have also got kind of a corporate social responsibility agenda, and we're there helping. So I specialize in the arts marketing community, and I provide consultancy service pro bono for free to that community.
Okay, and a nice link into your speciality there with Hallam. What is your speciality here?
Hallam is a digital marketing agency, and we help businesses to thrive online. So the kind of things we do, we run social media marketing campaigns for the United Nations. We set up branding, online branding activities for Speedo. We work with Suzuki to help with their dealer network. So fundamentally, we do things like search engine optimization and pay-per-click advertising. We build websites. We run digital campaigns. We are a full-service digital agency.
And what are some of the results that businesses should expect to see from working with a business that provides those sort of services?
Such a good question. The very first thing we have to do in any successful project is agree the scope of what it is that the client wants. In my experience, and I think probably you're the same as me, for businesses like me, I want my business to grow. I want my business to thrive. I want a great reputation. So if we're looking at the kind of projects that we work on, generally it has to do with either they want more leads generating or they want higher value clients. They want to reach clients who maybe haven't heard of them before. But in the main, our success criteria is always based on making our clients more successful.
Okay, and what's one thing about that speciality that people should know, but you tend to find don't?
Do you know, I think this is kind of a weird one, but I think nowadays there ain't no such thing as digital marketing anymore. I think the one thing our clients really are surprised about is digital marketing is just a subset of good old-fashioned great marketing. So if you're doing great marketing, if you know what your offer is, if you know who your clients are, you know what your proposition is, digital marketing is just another channel for reaching them. So a lot of the work we have to do a lot of times is bringing clients right back to those basics of making sure that they know what their product is, what makes them unique, what do their clients want, who are their clients, and we're applying digital to it. I guess the other thing that perhaps people don't realize is if, let's say, I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, but we might be entering some interesting economic times. And if we're going to be going into these interesting times, and as the Chinese curse says, may your life, be interesting, marketing is the one budget that you don't want to cut. So if you're looking to power in our case, we powered our way through recessions. The way you power through a recession, it's marketing, isn't it? You got to keep the leads coming in.
Yeah, and I suppose for those businesses that do invest in marketing during those tougher times, it tends to be the plug that gets pulled for a lot of other businesses. So you give yourself a distinct advantage. You're playing on a much higher level than everybody else as well.
And I think you're right. And I think the two plugs that get pulled, both of them, which I think would be catastrophic for businesses, is that we could pull the plug on marketing. And the other one that often will get pulled would be on training and development of our people. And yet businesses like mine, probably businesses like yours, our greatest asset is our people. So of all the things not to cut, training and development's not one and marketing's not the other.
You've been in business for a long time now, coming up to 20 years. Can you think of a really good example for the listeners of a client where you've gone in and provided your services and it's made a huge difference to the business?
One of my favorite stories to tell is we were working with a company who provides, of all things, skip hire, kind of like waste disposal skips.
Absolutely. Got one on the drive at the moment.
Oh, don't Good. Hopefully it's my client. And what we wanted to do is we built this online platform where people could book their skip online. And then we ran a really stonking, really good media campaign. And lo and behold, we had to turn the campaign off because they rented all their skips. So I think this, to me, you talk about stuff that makes you happy in your work. It makes me really happy to see my clients be happy. So a lot of these I think the thing that we do that gives us the greatest professional satisfaction is when we do something transformational for a client.
And that's when you've got a good campaign, when you have to turn it off because it's doing too well.
It's just so great. Exactly.
And is there anybody out there right now, be it one of your clients or somebody that you admire in the digital marketing sector that you think does particularly well? So if listeners are looking for a good example to go and have a look at, who would you suggest?
Gosh, there's so many examples. And I think it would be worth kind of breaking your question down into a couple different spaces. The first would be is if you're working in the business to consumer space, you can't beat Apple, can you? On the one hand, Apple does it so perfectly. And then some of us might say maybe Apple doesn't even have to try very hard anymore because they're so very, very successful. But if we also look at B2B, and that's the area that we specialize in. So we specialize in business to business marketing. I'm using one example of a client that we're working with called Advanced Handling. And they do packaging machinery. And their marketing is brilliant. They talk about their company values, what makes their people special, what makes their equipment super special, and they are a high growth business driving huge volumes of sales. So if you're looking for a good B2B example, I'd say go take a look at Advanced Dynamics.
Yeah, and typically that's an industry that you wouldn't necessarily associate with good digital marketing. But obviously there's a lot more businesses now that are starting to cotton on to the fact that it can make a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference. And the beauty of Advanced Dynamics is that they had a great culture and they had great leadership. So I think they were then open to us exploring these ideas of using different campaigns to reach different markets. And like you said, it really did make a huge difference to their bottom line and to their profit, to the point now that what they're tasking us with doing is they want to make the company even more profitable.
And do you see businesses that understand the importance of digital marketing but don't necessarily or aren't going about it in the wrong way? What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see out there?
You were talking about business to business and their adoption of digital techniques. And I would say at this point, there are very few, if any, businesses that I speak to that don't know that they need digital marketing. So I think that awareness, that acceptance is there. I think the big problem with leadership is three things. The first thing is, what does good look like? So what they want to know is, if I'm doing it well, what should I get in return? The second thing that we could take a look at would be is how much should it cost and how much resource do I need? And then the third thing is it really going to be worth all this faff? So I think that they do know that they need to do it, and we are seeing these kind of changes taking place.
And if you could summarize with one action for the listeners to complete after having listened to this episode that's going to maybe enhance their digital footprint, generate more sales, what would you recommend that they do?
Oh, I want to give you two. Can I not give you two?
Okay, we'll go for it.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, I'll let you go for two.
Top one. The top one's going to be test, learn, test. These kind of things, I think if we're looking at digital campaigns, you just have to try something, see if it works. If it works well, continue to improve. If it doesn't work, pivot and change. And that takes me to my second suggestion, which is then called just do it. I think the big problem with digital marketing is we can get something called analysis paralysis. We sit and we think and we measure and yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, just do it and see what's going to happen.
Some great tips there, Susan. We know about your speciality now and what you guys at Hallam can really help businesses with. Now I'd like to find out a little bit more about your own journey, particularly to the launch of Starting Hallam. As we mentioned earlier, you've been in business now for almost 20 years, so congratulations, because that in itself is such a huge achievement. Can you tell us a bit about your business journey from the very start leading up to the launch of Hallam?
I come from a family of teachers. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a teacher, and actually I was a senior lecturer here at Nottingham Trent University, so I taught computing for a lot of years. But I was involved in the internet in the early days, and I ran my first digital workshop in 1993. So we tend to think this internet thing is new. Well, trust me, this internet thing ain't new. It's been around for a while. After a stint working at British Telecom and working at Capital One, I did decide to set my own business up. And I was a sole trader working at home. I had my offices there. But do you know there's a well-known firm of solicitors that became a client when I was a one-man band. And they would come to my house and I would do digital consultancy for them. And they're still my client today.
Wow, 20 years later.
Isn't that really, I hope you can hear me smiling on that. So It's a good thing. So my journey, I think, started as a one-man band, and it was truly a lifestyle business. So I was a one-man band for about 10 years until my children grew up and went to university. So really, we've had a very high growth trajectory over the last course of the 9 years. We currently employ about 60 people. And in turn, as I say, we work with a very wide client base. So we've had this growth trajectory, but I didn't come from a business background. Like I said, my mom and dad were both teachers. And can you imagine when I gave up that teaching job, my dad looked at me and said, this internet thing's not going to last, you know. But anyway, it did, and it's gone very successfully.
How did you get your first job?
Once upon a time here in the United Kingdom, there was an organization called Business Link, and I got a contract as an e-commerce advisor with the government. So in terms of a business startup, I was very fortunate that I had a contract that I think at the time gave me 8 days a month, which meant I could pay my mortgage. So I had this kind of guaranteed income. And then from there, the business grew and grew and grew. And the best bit of advice as the business grew and grew, I bumped into a friend of mine called Pete, and we were going out for beer. And I said to Pete, Pete, I got all this work. There's too much work coming in. I don't know what to do. And he just looked at me like I was stupid. And he said, if you've got too much work and you don't know what to do, you're not charging enough. So the really good bit of advice I got, and Pete, I have to thank you to this day, Pete, thank you for advising me to put my prices up.
Did you take action on that once you'd given you that advice?
Darn right I did. Do you know what else is ironic? I didn't actually lose business by putting my prices up. The perceived value went up. And if anything, I was getting better, higher quality work by virtue of putting my prices up.
And what do you think the lesson is there for the listeners?
Be brave. Be confident in your ability. You are worth more than you think. I think the other lesson, of course, is what's known as perceived value. I have one client once upon a time who said, I would really, really love to be in the Sunday Times. And I said, well, if we could get you into the Sunday Times, what would that be worth to you? He says, it'd be worth a lot of money. I said, well, it would cost a lot to get into the Sunday Times. So if I were to charge you, let's say, £10,000 to get you into the Sunday Times, would that be worth it? He's like, definitely. You get me into the Sunday Times? Definitely worth it. So within a week, we got him into the Sunday Times. And he's looking at me saying, well, that didn't take very much time. That didn't take very long to get, why do you charge me £10,000? And I said, because that's what it's worth for you to get into the Sunday Times. And by the way, it took all those years of experience for us to get to know editors and journalists and contacts to get you. So I think it's about, your question is, what's the key lesson for us as business people to take away? And that is, don't underestimate your value.
With regards to your speciality that you are an expert in now, when did you first realize that you had a passion or a talent for that?
Have you noticed by now that I'm not born here in the UK, am I? I was born and raised in the United States.
I think we may have had some suspicions up to this point.
I think you picked up on my Philadelphia accent. So I was born and raised in Philly, and I was an exchange student. I came to study here in the United Kingdom, where I met my husband, and now I live here. But I was fortunate enough to receive a fellowship to do my postgraduate studies for free in the United States, which is at that time was worth quite a lot of money. And when I went back, I did my degree in what's known as information science, which of course is the precursor of digital. Everything digital in the internet was about information. So I think I was very lucky that my postgraduate studies led me into this work. And then as I was teaching at the university, I was given exposure to all of these really cool technologies. And from there, it then went leaps and bounds. And then I was very fortunate to work at British Telecom, specializing in small businesses. So I think, on the one hand, you might say I'm lucky. I'm really lucky to have grown this kind of business, but I don't believe in luck. I think you make your own luck. And I think those opportunities were presented to me. And I said the one word that I think all business people should say, and that word is yes. Can you do this? Yes, I can. And then afterwards, stop and ask the questions, figure out what needs to get done. But I think being optimistic and positive and saying yes has had a lot to do with my success.
When you were in those, you've mentioned working at BT and a couple of other places. When was the trigger moment, or was there a specific trigger moment when you realized that you had to go out there and set this up for yourself and be your own boss?
I really did. There was a real catalyst in my life, and that is I was headhunted to join Capital One, which of course is a bank whose European headquarters is right here in Nottingham City Centre, huge employer. It's one of Europe's best employers. And I had quite a nice senior role at Capital One. However, I did find that two things, that it wasn't really a good cultural fit for me. And more importantly, I think there was the expectation perhaps that I would then drop everything and fly over to America to work there. And I didn't want to do that. So I think it was that experience working at Capital One that I just shook my head and said, you know what? I'm ready just to do this on my own. So I think for me, it just took one particular piece of employment that I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do my own thing. I want to be master of my own destiny.
And did you always have ambitions to become master of your own destiny, or was it the circumstances at the time whilst you were at BT?
Well, on the one hand, I think my parents were always really good to say that I could do anything that I wanted. So I think I came from a really fortunate background that my parents just said, yeah, you can do that. But I do think that probably what tipped me over to the edge to go into business on my own, I don't think it was even on my radar in my 20s at all. I never even would have considered it. I think I would have considered it too risky. So I think it's when I was in my 30s that I got that confidence and that ability and that skill set. And then there was the light bulb moment that went off. And I think that's what caused it to happen.
And what had held you back from becoming an entrepreneur before then? Obviously, you've mentioned then talk of in your 20s, maybe perceiving it as too much of a risk. What else would you put that down to?
Well, and again, I think in the 20s, it wasn't even that I didn't want to be an entrepreneur because it was risky. I think it's because I just really enjoyed teaching and I enjoyed my work. I didn't actually procrastinate in setting my business up. If anything, I just did the just say yes thing. I think I was sitting on the sofa with my husband one night and I'm drinking a glass of wine and I'm pretty much saying, I really don't like this job. And we did discuss the fact that I had these skills that would be very marketable and consultancy that I could do. And I just went in and I quit the next day. And that was it. Bob's your uncle.
Wow, the very next day.
The very next day. The only thing is, again, I think as a startup business, and I think this is true for many startups, I'm very lucky that I had a partner who was able to financially support our family so that in the event I wasn't earning as much money as I was formerly, we still wouldn't lose our house. So again, I'd like to thank my husband, Mike, for that. He did support me through this startup phase. And I think many of the startup businesses that I know that are success often have a partner who's very understanding.
When you first launched, how did you know that there was a market for the services that you were going to be providing?
I knew that there would be a market for the services that I was providing two different ways. The first is at the university was hiring me out as a consultant and the university was taking my consultancy fees. So I knew that there was a demand from the university environment. And then also I could tell in terms of going from British Telecom to Capital One, I was headhunted. I was approached to go and move into that job. And I think if you are in a position where you are being headhunted, I would argue this could be an excellent signal that you could perhaps move into the kind of work that you want to do in an entrepreneurial manner.
After you had that business of the 8 days a month, how did you market yourself and how did you separate yourself from the competition? Was there much competition for this type of service back then? When
I started the business, search engine optimization was in its early days. And my main competition was what is known as black hat cowboy SEO. There was a lot of really dirty work going on. So my USP, what made me unique in the work, and I think that's the hardest thing for entrepreneurs to do, is to just determine what their USP is. Now, I was in a very fortunate position because I had two USPs. This was 20 years ago. Obviously, being American in the UK was a USP, made me memorable. And the second thing is I think being a woman working in computing was a USP. But my real USP had to do with the fact that I was an ethical business. So it had to do with independent consultant, ethical, that I was looking out for your best interest. And I think the growth of the agency was entirely based on trust. And I think people trusted my expertise. They trusted the results that I would deliver. They trusted me not to lead them up the garden path. And I think that I would call that our company North Star. Our North Star is all about trust. And that hasn't changed in 20 years.
And can you expand a bit more on what you define a North Star as?
For me, the North Star is what are the guiding principles that the reason why I set the company up in the first place, The North Star are the decisions I made that then helped me to then grow from one person to 3 people to 5 people. I think the North Star has to do with my values that are my personal values that have now been imbued as part of Hallam's values. And I think when you deviate from your North Star, that's when things usually start to go wrong.
Yeah, I think it's really amazing that despite all the technology changes and how the world has changed over the last 20 years, the fact that your North Star has remained the same from day one and has led to the success that you've had now is a real testament to putting some work in to begin with to find out what your North Star is and then sticking to it.
I agree that North Star to me is the underlying core success of the business. I think the 3 other things, though, that for me personally, as an entrepreneur starting the business, I realize now in hindsight, looking back all these years later, the 3 things that took place is the first thing is I was actually very good at what I was selling. I am very good at technology. I'm very good at digital marketing, and I do deliver great results. The second prerequisite would be is then you have to love what you do. I actually have a passion. Even today, I learned this really cool new thing called Google Discover today. And it's something that I didn't understand how it works. So to actually take the time to figure out how does this technology work and how can this benefit my clients? And so I think if you've got the technical skills, you also need to love it. But the real success point then arises is the third criteria. So the third criteria is it has to pay well. So if you're good at it and you love it and it pays well, I think that's the secret success to being a good entrepreneur.
That's the golden triangle to be looking for. Going back to the earlier days of starting Hallam, can you remember, is there a particular challenge that stands out from those first 12 months of being in business that you really remember all these years later? And how did you beat it?
Probably one of my most memorable moments was, I guess, about 18 months into being self-employed and running my own business. And I was winning a lot of contracts and I was winning quite interesting work. And I won a contract with an individual that I just did not enjoy working with. I did not like his values. I did not like how he treated me. I did not like how he behaved with his own clients. And I agonized over this for quite a while to say, in my mind's eye, I did not want to work with this company. And it took me longer than I care to admit. But in the end of the day, I fired him as a client. And I still remember the rage on his face when I said, I'm very sorry, but I can't be working with you anymore. And I will help you find another partner to work with. But I think it's those kind of brave decisions that I think are real seminal moments for me as an entrepreneur. And I do look back on that from time to time and think, why didn't I do it more quickly? Maybe I could have communicated it more clearly. But the main thing is, darn it, aren't I glad I did it?
And would you say for somebody who may be in that position now that is in the early days, when you do need as much business as possible, that you should be firing clients that you don't want to work with? Or how do you get that balance right between bringing in enough income and working with the clients that you want to work with?
Even as the business grew and grew, we were still taking contracts that perhaps we shouldn't have, because perhaps the contract was getting to be too small, or perhaps mainly it's because they were too small for our expectations, or they weren't able to take advantage of the full breadth of what we were able to offer them. But I do understand that, as a startup, as an entrepreneur, you take the work because what you want to be able to do is you want to continue to grow the business. I think the lesson I learned is growth isn't good unless it's profitable growth. So what we need to be doing is focusing on the clients that we want to work with, that are going to be profitable and who are going to be benefiting from the kind of work that we do.
And how did you market Hallam back then? And how has that changed to how you market the business now?
Like most startups and entrepreneurs I know, the main way I marketed the business was word of mouth. It was my reputation. It was word of mouth. And in my heart of hearts, I still think digital marketing to many degrees, even now, is still about virtual, digital word of mouth. So on the internet, what other people say about you is more important than what you say about yourself. So in terms of our marketing at the moment, I would say one of the main forms of marketing we get is client recommendations and client testimonials. They are invaluable. To that end, we have actually just won an award. We are Google's Agency of the Year for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for growing businesses online.
Wow, that is a huge achievement.
And that is, thank you. And that and it's probably one of my proudest achievements, I have to say. And that is based predominantly on the fact what our clients say about us. We were also audited by Deloitte in terms of the results we get. But I think you were asking, what is our main marketing channel? And I think our main marketing tactic for us as an agency still is delighting our customers and getting them to sing our praises.
So earlier you mentioned that you're now at a team of 60. At what point did you realize that you needed to bring on your first employee? You mentioned that you had set out for it to be a lifestyle business. And obviously when you start bringing on board employees, you are starting to move away from that.
Two things happened. I have two children, Emily and George went to, I think, a big school. I think George went to school. So at that point, I think my personal responsibilities had started to quiet down. So it kind of left me having that emotional space and that energy to drive the business forward. And the second thing that was happening in that perfect storm is that the digital marketing space was really taking off. So there was a huge amount of work. So I did, again, one of my really super brave decisions. You look back and think, darn it, that was a good decision, stupid though it may seem. I started to hiring people in groups of 4. So rather than just taking one person on, I immediately took 2 people on and 2 more people after that.
And what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, what it essentially did is, at the time, what I thought it would do is it would give me the critical mass we needed in order to leap from one-man band contracts into larger contracts. And as it turns out, that was definitely the case. So we took 2 employees plus a further 2 right away. And then it kind of then stabilized for a bit. So there was that group of 5 of us working together. And then as the contract started to grow, I then hired 4 more people. And we went, so we kind of went up that escalator like that with groups of employees.
And at each point on the escalator, you were speculating to accumulate. So you were bringing the people on board before you had the work to fulfill all of them.
You used one of my favorite phrases, and that is speculate to accumulate. And I think it wasn't being arrogant. It was just looking on the horizon. I was looking at my sales pipeline. I was looking at, we are a business, what's known as a retainer model, which means we have ongoing revenue, recurring revenue. So we're able to look at our recurring revenues. I'm looking at my sales pipeline. I'm looking at the state of the market. And most importantly, I was looking to see what our competitors were doing. I'm seeing this upward growth trajectory. So it just made sense. It made good sense to hire 4 more people.
And when you're looking to hire today, what are some of the key things that you look for in your people that you bring on board?
Over the years, I've hired some great people. My colleague Ben Wood and Jake Third, they've been here with me for 5, 6 years, I think maybe 7 years. Anyway, guys, I'm not sure, but you've been here a long time. So we've hired some great people who've stayed here a long time. But I would have to confess as well, we have also hired people who haven't fit in so well. So I think the 3 big lessons I've learned is, the first lesson is we need to hire people on their values and their attitude. So are they going to have the same, back to my North Star, are these people going to be like us? Do they want to delight customers? Do they want excellence? Are they ambitious? The mistake I was making was hiring on technical aptitude. Did they know how to do what Hallam does, and were they good at it? But that didn't mean they were going to be a great fit. The second thing that I then learned is that you do need robust hiring processes. So we did work closely with the University of Nottingham and Nottingham Trent universities, who have helped us put together a recruitment process and trained us on how to find great people. And then the third thing that I learned is, when you get great people, you simply have to sit down with them and ask them, what do you want? So I ask them, what do they want out of their career? And I do everything we can to enable, to pave the way forward for them to have that kind of career growth or personal development that they need, so they want to stay working at Hallam.
And you mentioned there, when you are bringing on people on board, you're obviously looking for a real good synergy with your values and their values. And I think this is always the acid test of a business, of how true they are prepared to stick to their values. How do you deal with a top performer but isn't necessarily in line with the company values? Do you feel that's a point where you help them move on to find a place in another business where they are more aligned to the values? Or do you keep them on board because although they might be causing a bit of disruption with the rest of the team, they're actually bringing in the business?
One other lesson I've learned over the years is to be grateful for as long as people are with me. So if people do choose to leave the company, I have to be grateful that they were here, and I wish them well as they move on to the future. You can't take it personally that people want to continue to spread their wings and fly and move on. The second thing that you're asking is if people are disruptive. I would argue that's probably a management issue. And that probably is not a reflection of their skills, but on my managerial weakness. So I think that's, again, back to ongoing professional development and training and becoming a great leader and becoming a great manager. There's always something new that we can learn. But I would argue if you think people are, the word that we often use in the industry is toxic. If you have an employee who is toxic, there might be a chance it's a reflection on, say, me as a leader.
And that's an interesting perspective. And I don't think that's the first point of call when people are dealing with toxic people, is to look at actually how am I handling this person, and is there a way that I can improve my own management skills with this? So a real good insight there. And you've already mentioned with regards to creating a great company culture and engaging the team and have people enjoy working here and staying here for a long time. Some of the things that you do are talking to them and seeing where they want to go and helping them with that. I've also seen through LinkedIn, particularly for a new starter, they're greeted with a big welcome pack, which looks amazing, really nicely put together, laptops, everything that they're going to need. What are some of the other ways that you are able to attract and retain great people at Hallam?
We have a program that we call The Greatest Place to Work. And I think probably your business, like my business, great people have to choose to want to work here. So what we try to do is to figure out and again, if we're hiring people in their 20s and highly skilled people in their 30s, perhaps what they want might be slightly different to what I want. So for example, we have some of the innovative things that we've introduced into our culture is if you have worked at Hallam for 5 years, we will offer you a sabbatical. So if you are then ready to go off and do a little bit of traveling and refresh and rejuvenate and recharge, we will support you on that. So we've had one colleague, Stan, who's gone off traveling, and we welcomed him back. We have a colleague, Jake, who's getting ready to do the same thing, and we have to welcome them back. This, I think, reflects on my thinking that I'm lucky to have these people. So what do I need to do to make them want to stay? We also give people individual training budgets. We try to ensure that they get opportunities to do public speaking. I think the one big thing I learned in terms of creating a great culture, again, it really, and this is a tough one for me and I'm ashamed to say it, it's about saying thank you to people. I think we need to thank our colleagues that we are appreciative of what they do. And I think that was my big early management lesson, was to deliberately say, you have done such a good job. Thank you for being part of Team Hallam.
And that can go a long way, can't it? Because at the end of the day, we all want to be valued and feel like we're doing a good job. And what does the future look like for Hallam today? Where are you hoping to take the business now that you're at a team of 60? You've won all these huge awards and worldwide recognition. What's next?
The future is exciting for Hallam. There's such good things happening. And if we look at the things, there are such interesting technological developments that are taking place with things like marketing automation, big data, a huge algorithmic changes. So I think we have these exciting technical challenges. I think if we're looking, we are working with larger clients. We're getting proposals. So we are being approached to work with high-end fashion retailers, large insurance companies. So I think for a small person from Nottingham, for us to be working with these international brands, just pinch myself with excitement. How did we get to be such a successful business? So we have great technical opportunities. We have great business opportunities. And I think the final thing is that I do look at the interesting people who want to join us. And I have to say my greatest pleasure at the moment is being surrounded by people smarter than me. And every day I get to listen to their ideas and watch what they're doing. And I'm thinking, darn, I'm glad I work here. So the future's bright.
And what about personally, Susan? Do you have any long-term aspirations for yourself? Any BHAGs, any big ambitions that you're working towards?
As I've been in business for 20 years, I'm in the path of succession planning. So as I'm approaching retirement, what we're doing is putting together this plan about how do I exit the business. So I think that has a lot of our attention at the moment, figuring out how do we create this wonderful business that perhaps my colleagues might like to buy out. And as for me, I'm going traveling, baby. I've got places to go and things to do, people to see.
Okay, excellent. It sounds amazing, and the future does sound really exciting to be a part of. It must be a real buzz to be in a business that really knows where it's going and has all these opportunities on the horizon. It's exciting for me just talking about it, so never mind being a part of it. So, Susan, we know about your speciality. We know about your journey to launching Hallam and what's coming next. Now I'd like to find out a little bit more about Susan, the entrepreneur / businesswoman. So could you tell us what a typical day in the life of Susan Hallam looks like?
I believe work is good for you. I think work is good. I love my work. I love what I do. So in the main, my typical day is I wake up very early. I'm up and ready to roll but there's something called the 5:15 Club. I don't know if you've heard it before, but I start my day at 5:15 and I can get bits and pieces done. And I do work relatively long hours, but then I have to also say, I do take a lot of holiday. I take all my holiday. I try to travel every month. So I don't know. I think like a lot of entrepreneurs I know, work hard, play hard. And I do love what I do.
And do you have any particular morning routines that you like to follow?
I don't know. My routines aren't terribly scientific, but I do start each morning by reading. It could be things like the newspaper. I could be reading books. I have a Kindle and I like reading management things. I like reading technology things. But for me, after I feed the cat, after I make a cup of tea, after I kiss my husband good morning, generally I'll sit down and I'll give myself the luxury of doing some reading.
And do you think that's a particular habit, or are there any other habits in there out of the ones that you've mentioned so far that you feel have actually contributed towards your success?
I think that idea of routine is very important, but equally, I do think taking the opportunity of any top opportunity that arises is probably what's been my success. So I think in some respects, deviating from routine and doing something unexpected, I find that it fires your brain up. It makes you excited about things. So I do like the unexpected. I do like serendipity, and I do like going off the path, most trodden.
And you've talked about you like to go away once a month. You're heading towards going traveling. After you've had a long day at work, it's been a busy day meeting clients, putting proposals together. You've got home. You're feeling exhausted. What are some of the things that you like to do in your downtime?
I'm very lucky that I live and work in Nottingham City Centre, so I'm able to walk home in the evening. And I find that kind of walk, that is a really good decompression, a bit of exercise, a bit of fresh air, getting away from the office. I also, although I live in the city centre, I do have a beautiful garden. So I do go spend time out in my garden. I love nature, to see what's happening. So I do spend a lot of time outside. And I think that's probably one of the disadvantages of my job. I do spend a lot of time looking at a computer screen. So getting outside, fresh air. I guess the only problem I have is this when the clocks change and it gets dark at night. And I find that very, very difficult. So getting up early again, when it's light, get up early, get outside, get some fresh air.
Being successful in business has a lot to do with making tough and difficult decisions. Is there in your career, be it at Hallam or in the roles that you had previously, is there a decision that stands out the most?
I think when in business, there always will be decisions that are difficult to make. And sometimes we have as much information as we need. Sometimes we're operating on insufficient information. I do know for me, the most difficult decisions are usually the ones where I have then procrastinated in making what I know in my gut was an inevitable decision. So I think for me, the most difficult decisions I've had to make is when I have felt it hard to cut my losses. I think sometimes you look back on it and your gut instinct is saying, this isn't right, cut your losses and walk away. So I think that's the big business lesson I've learned, is to learn how and when to trust your gut instinct and cut your losses.
And which parts of business do you particularly enjoy the most? Where do you like to spend your time really getting involved?
The two things that I love the most is I love working with my clients. I love talking to my clients. I love learning about their business. I love making a difference. And I think what fits that hand in glove is I love working with smart people, my colleagues. So for me, I'm very much a people person. I like to see us coming up with really good ideas, delivering exceptional results, and being passionate. I like working with passionate people.
And are there any parts of business that you're not particularly fond of?
Of course, there are parts of business I don't enjoy. And one of the big lessons I've learned is that every business needs two kinds of leaders. One of them is called the visionary, and one of them is called the implementer or the doer. And I am a visionary. I like good ideas. I like imagining what's going to be possible. And then what I need is somebody who's going to sit and do the work.
And do you tend to find that people are either one or the other? Either they are this creative visionary, or they are somebody that can take that and then execute on it and get it done.
Exactly. And I think they are almost, in my experience, they are always two different people. And the person who is the implementer takes great joy in delivering and doing, improving and innovating. So I would hate in any way to disparage the person who does the implementation, because without a great implementer, you don't have a business.
What are some of the attributes, beliefs, skill sets that you think are essential for people to be successful in any business?
I think to be successful in any business, you need to be open to the fact that you don't know it all, and you need to learn something new every day. I think the other thing in terms of not knowing it all is surrounding yourself by other highly competent, excellent people. Don't be afraid of them. Hire them in and get them to join your club. And I think the third thing in all skills that we need is that there has to be a certain amount of practical business acumen, understanding the numbers, understanding the finance, getting to the bottom of these things. I think also you can't have a business if you're not going to have a handle on the numbers.
And maybe just singling out 2 or 3 of your own attributes that you feel have helped you to get to the position that you're in now. What would they be?
I think the attributes I would have are optimism. So I am a glass half full kind of person. I think when the going gets tough, you just have to motor on. I think for all businesses, there are going to be bumps in the road. It's how you handle the bumps that matter. I think the second reason I think probably been successful at business is that I am smart. I'm confident in what I do. I'm skilled at what I do. And I think of all the business owners I know, whether you be an estate agent or whether you work in construction or whatever your business is, generally these people are expert at what they do.
What do you think some of the misconceptions are about being a business owner that people who aren't in that position have? So for anybody that may be thinking of starting off in business for themselves, what do you think are some of the things that they need to be aware of?
I do quite a lot of mentoring with startup businesses. And when I look at people taking the first steps into starting their own business, there is usually one signal whether they're going to be a success or not. And that one signal is, do they have a business plan? Have you managed to write down, it doesn't have to be a big document, it could be a single-sided A4, but do you know what your proposition is? Do you know what the market looks like? And do you understand how this business is going to succeed? I see a lot of entrepreneurs where it's still a pipe dream, where they're formulating ideas. And that's okay to have a dream, and it's good to be formulating, but you still need to have a business plan.
And what are some of the benefits that you've found of being a business owner versus being employed in another business?
Oh, do you know, I'm unemployable now. I don't think I could ever go back to being an employee. The joy of being an entrepreneur is to have the freedom and the latitude to experiment and do what I want. It's given me responsibilities that I would not have dreamed of. It's let me meet people that I would never have met if I were in a course of employment. But I think the greatest advantage to being an entrepreneur is the personal and professional development that I've had in terms of learning how to run a successful business, how to manage great people, how to launch products and services. I don't think I would have learned half as much if I had been an employee as I have as an entrepreneur.
Now, I know you like to look at the glass as half full, what are some of the downsides to being a business owner that you found over the last 20 years?
I think also as a business owner, particularly working in consultancy, the kind of work I do, is there is that problem of feast or famine. And that means if work comes in, I would always say yes, just because give me the work while it's here. And there may be times that work doesn't turn up. But I think the biggest problem I think that I faced as an entrepreneur is that actually being an entrepreneur can be lonely. You know, you are by yourself. You're not working with a team anymore. And the one thing I did do is I found that by joining networks, by getting a coach, by getting mentoring, I had to build a network of people around me. When you're an employee, that network is readily available to you. So I think the hardest thing for me as an entrepreneur was, in a sense, the loneliness.
So building a successful business is a series of trying something new, failing, learning from it, and trying again and adjusting it and pivoting. So in essence, there are really no failures as long as you can learn something from it and implement that moving forwards. What would you say over the course of your business career so far has been your worst entrepreneurial moment?
We, of course, are making mistakes all along the way. And as you say, I think we have to look at them positively because as long as you're learning from the experience, all's well and good. Nevertheless, I think looking back in terms of kind of the mistakes that I've made, in the main, I think the biggest mistake I made was based on an emotional decision rather than on a rational business decision. So this was, I think, getting wound up and excited and ready to move forward and making this decision. And in hindsight, it was definitely the wrong decision. And then it was very difficult to extricate myself from that situation, but it just had to be done. So I think the lesson that I've learned from that then would be is the signals were there all along, if only my eyes had been open to them. So I think that's where you do have to practice these skills of staying open to messaging from other sources, to keep open to other people's perspectives and point of view, so that while on the one hand we want to plow ahead and make these decisions, stay open to the smart people that are around you.
When the times do get tough, because we all go through those peaks and troughs, what is it that keeps you going? Where does your motivation and where has your drive come from?
I attribute all my motivation and drive to my upbringing from my parents. And I think many of us have those kind of folk to thank. I do look at my parents and they did a great job with me and 5 kids. And I do think that ambition comes from them. I am at the core very ambitious. I'm at the core quite competitive. I do want to excel. So I think that sense of excellence, we discussed earlier, a North Star. I like to be good at everything I do. So it isn't just business. I think innately, many successful business people I know are also great musicians. They're great cooks. They're great gardeners. They're linguists. So success comes in many guises, and that great business people are often good at other things as well.
Would you consider yourself successful?
Yes, I would consider myself successful. And I think it's time for a lot of us to count our blessings. You know, I think things have gone really well. I've built an amazing company. I've got a great family. I love my travel. I'm quite content. And I think I have a lot to be grateful for. And I think to be thankful is another thing that business people need to do every day. A little bit of exercise, a little bit of gratitude doesn't do anybody any harm.
And we've talked about earlier how your friend gave you that advice of raising your prices when you had all this work coming in. But if I were to ask you what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, be it business related or outside of that, what would it be?
I think the best piece of advice I ever had, again, came from my dad Bruce. And what he says, this too will pass. So that means when you have great success, don't forget to celebrate it right now. I think sometimes many of us in our business journey forget to celebrate our success because we're already moving on to the next thing. But that moment of glory will pass, so celebrate now. But the reverse is true. We can go into deeper, darker, troubled times, and you know what? This too will pass. So everything, the big wheel turns, and this too will pass.
And if you could go back to Susan Hallam at 21 years old, and you could give her one piece of advice, what would it be?
My one bit of advice I would give to my 21-year-old self is just do it. Just do it. If you've got these great ideas, be brave, jump in, the water's fine.
You've mentioned earlier you like to read first thing in the morning as part of your routine. If you could pick one business book to recommend to somebody who's about to start out in business, which one would it be, and what was the key takeaway that you took from that book?
Further to the conversation that you and I just had earlier, that there needs to be two skills, two types of people to run a business. The book I would recommend to you is called Rocket Fuel. And Rocket Fuel does talk about the fact that we need the visionary, we need the implementer, and these different kind of things. Now, if you're a one-man band, it may be, and I think in hindsight, I had to do both things for quite a while. But at least I think this book is an excellent way to explore the different kinds of skills successful business people need, helps you to understand your own strengths and weaknesses, and then what you need to do to take the next step to start to grow your business. So it's called Rocket Fuel.
And for any listeners that are interested in finding out more about Rocket Fuel, all of the resources and anything else that we've talked about in this interview will be on the show notes at benjaminbrain.co.uk. So make sure you head over there. And staying on that book theme, Susan, if you had to write a book about your journey in business so far, what would the title of the book be?
I speak a lot about growing the business and scaling the business up. And as I look at the talks that I give, if I were to write a book, Ben, my book would be called Onwards and Upwards.
Great answer. Love it.
Onwards and Upwards.
A great title. Definitely one that I would be picking up if I saw it on Amazon. Who would you say has been your biggest inspiration to date with regards to your own business journey? Or is there anybody that you follow closely now?
I think looking back over my career, I have been very fortunate to have two exceptional mentors and business coaches. So I think for your listeners, one thing to be thinking about would be, A, is there anybody providing that mentoring and coaching for you? Or do you need to line up somebody to help you with your mentoring and coaching? But the second thing I would also ask your listeners to do is to think, could you be a mentor and a coach to someone else? I think one of the most important things that we could think about as successful business people is pay it forward. If many of us have been lucky to start businesses, or we've come from careers where we've been successful, what could we be doing to help other entrepreneurs? And if you're looking at your own startup journey, you need to find somebody to be your own mentor and coach.
What would you say is the differentiation between a mentor and a coach?
My personal view is the mentor is probably somebody who's had the experience that you've had and can help you go through the planning and activity and changes that you're going to experience. Whereas a coach can be more also then about personal and professional development, who can help you to then expand into the kind of potential of the person that you need to become.
And for somebody out there who realizes the importance and value of having particularly a mentor, what are some of the ways that you would suggest that they can actually go out there and find one?
One of the best places in my experience has actually been on LinkedIn. So using LinkedIn to find people who are really good at who you aspire to be, and reaching out to them and see maybe if they would be available to be a mentor to you. The universities provide mentoring opportunities, and I do believe that there's currently government funding that might help to pay for a mentor as well. But I think in your heart of hearts, you'll know you will see people who have been successful, who have achieved the kind of the path that you want to follow. And I think all you need to do is ask them.
So if you could recommend one resource, Susan, for the listeners to go out there, whether it be something to do with the digital marketing or marketing in general, or being successful in business, what would it be?
I work with a lot of really smart people, and on our website, we do publish a blog. So our website is www.hallam.co.uk, and in that blog, we write about digital strategy, practical tactics, latest developments, our news and views. So if I would recommend that your listeners go and take a look at our blog. There's loads of interesting stuff on there for them to take a look at.
Yeah, that's a great shout. And again, all the links for that will be included in the show notes over at my own blog. I've just got a couple of questions left for you, Susan, as we're just getting to the end of this hour mark now. So if you could summarize everything that we've talked about so far, Susan, in this interview, and it has been a genuinely fascinating interview. I've loved talking business with you for the last 60 minutes or so. And you were sat in front of somebody right now who was about to start in business, and you could give them 3 pieces of advice to help them give them the best chance of succeeding. What would those 3 pieces of advice be?
The first thing you need to do is you need to know your North Star. You need to know what you want to do. You need to love what you're doing. You need to know what makes you different. And you have to passionately believe in your business idea. Second thing is passion's great, but you also need a business plan. This is business after all. So have you done your numbers? Have you added it up? Does it make sense? And is it going to be a successful business proposition? And I guess the third thing to do is, right from the very beginning, surround yourself with other exceptional people. Surround yourself with exceptional business leaders. Find yourself with other people who inspire you. And then when it comes time to take on your own employees, hire the best people. So I think surrounding yourself with excellence makes all the difference.
3 excellent tips there, most definitely. Thank you, Susan. And my final question for today, for any of the listeners that want to find out more about Hallam, we've mentioned the website already at hallam.co.uk, but in terms of social media, any of the team that you think we should be following online, have you got any other recommendations?
We are on Twitter as Hallam Agency. We're on Facebook as Hallam Agency. So if you take a look, you'll find us out there. We're sharing ideas. And I would welcome all your listeners to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I would love to have a chance to have a conversation with them all on LinkedIn.
Well, Susan, that wraps up today's interview. And I really just want to say thank you, because that has far exceeded my already high expectations. So really want to thank you for taking the time out to join us on the podcast.
Thanks again for having me, Ben. It's been a great chance to reflect back over my years. It's been a real pleasure sharing what I've learned. I hope your listeners have taken away a few good ideas.
There are many, many golden nuggets included in that. So I'm sure that everybody will have really enjoyed listening to that, and their notepads will be full of notes and scribbles. And yep, as always, thank you to all of the listeners. I've loved producing this podcast and bringing it to you this week. So stay busy, stay hungry, get out there and make it happen. And I'll catch up with you all on the next week's episode of The Truth About Business. One final thing before you go. If you enjoyed this interview and want to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode with another real-life business champion, make sure you subscribe via iTunes, Spotify, your favourite podcast app, or by visiting my blog at benjaminbrain.co.uk and hitting subscribe. At the blog, you'll also find the show notes to this episode, which includes all the relevant links to the website, social media channels, contact details, and anything else that was discussed in the episode. Just type in the name of the guest, and that will bring that right up for you. And finally, I'm always on the search for great business owners who would be happy to spare just a couple of hours of the time to share their business experience with our audience. So if you know of anyone that would make a great guest, or you'd like to feature yourself, just let me know. Send an email to hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk and I'll reply personally as soon as possible. Also, if you've got any feedback, questions that you'd like me to ask our guests, or any other suggestions, I am definitely all ears. That email address again is hello@benjaminbrain.co.uk. So that's it for this episode. I just want to thank you sincerely for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay hungry, stay fearless, get out there and make it happen.